We don't know how that's happening. To me, it's just
Welcome to the Sundowners Club, where we are going to be talking about episodes 5 through 8, the second half of season 1 of the Peripheral today. We're going to be talking about what we saw in the last 4 episodes, where we think it's going to go in season 2, and what we thought about the initial season. Is there going to be a season 2, season 3? What we thought about the show, get some feedback. If you like what you see today and what you've heard, leave a comment below, hit the like button, and most importantly, hit subscribe so that we can grow our channel and the content. I'm your host, Sean. Without further ado, man to my right, my co-host, Sterling. What's up, buddy?
not much. How are you?
I'm good. So, the Peripheral. We started, we did a prior episode where we covered the first half of the season. It's a new show based on a William Gibson book and adapted for Amazon Prime. And so we covered the first 4 episodes. It had a little bit of a Matrix feel, a little bit of Blade Runner. You mentioned Ready Player One and some other shows, that was kind of around gaming
Yeah.
and virtual realities. The first 4 episodes, I really liked it. Obviously, there's some holes in the plot a little bit. There's a little bit of suspension of disbelief you have to have. But for a new show, I enjoyed it. What was your initial thoughts of the first 4 episodes before we cover the second half? Did you, after the first 4, what did you go into thinking about the final 4 episodes? What were your thoughts?
I mean, I was interested to see where it was going, but I was kind of worried that it would go off the rails once you saw the time travel aspect. And I think with the second part of the season, a lot of my fears are coming true on that. We talked about suspension of disbelief, but you got to have a lot of that in this show for it to make any sense.
Time travel is an interesting facet of storytelling that we've seen in movies and TV shows before. And whenever you see how time travel is tackled in a show or a movie, you really see how good the writers are.
Right.
Because it is very easy to go off the rails. It's very easy to really become silly fast. The 2 things that I've always referenced actually, I'm going to mention a third because a lot of people don't think about the third. Because when you think about time travel, you think about science fiction and fantasy novels and shows and movies. But for me, Back to the Future is the de facto standard around if you're going to do time travel. That is about
still one of the best.
It's a perfect movie. If you're going to pick out 5 or 10 of the best things that have ever been done, Back to the Future has to make that list every time. Perfect movie, can watch it over and over again. And then on the TV front, you had a show called 12 Monkeys that ran on the USA Network for a few seasons. And I personally, you had to stay with it because you would get completely lost. But I think they did time travel very well in that show. And it ran for, 4 or 5 seasons. But I really liked how that was done. And then the third one that probably never gets mentioned, but it's an early movie from the 80s. I think it was around 1981 maybe, with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour, called Somewhere in Time. And that was based on a Matheson is the name of the author, book called, I think, Bid Time Return. And the movie was called Somewhere in Time. And that was, to me, that was more romantic love story type, but it dealt with time travel. And that was, to me, perfectly done. It's a movie or something you don't hear about very much. But those 3 automatically jump out at me. But then there are hundreds of things that are not done well. So this one had big shoes to fill in terms of if they're going to explore time travel, which we do in the first 4 episodes. You mentioned the stubs, the branches and the timelines and what happens. And, you have to create a stub so that you don't impact the current timeline, right? So we get past the first 4 episodes, and we know that the main characters are Flynn Fisher, her brother Burton, Wilf, who she meets in 2099 London, and Lex Zuboff, who has a band of characters that work for Lex that are with something called the Klept.
Yeah,
and,
Lev.
Lex, yeah, Lev. I'm sorry, Lev Zuboff. Right. And I'm thinking of Lex Luthor because he certainly acts like Lex Luthor.
He kind of does.
But and by the way, the guy that plays Lev Zuboff, great actor.
I think he's one of the best characters.
Yeah, he should show up. Pick the best shows or the best Marvel, Disney. Stick this guy in other films and series because he's amazing. But and then you have the research initiative, which Dr. Charisse, we see her. She's got the shaved head, and she's going after Flynn, and so she's got her motivations. And then you have the Neoprims, and we have this girl Alita that we meet in the first couple of episodes that has hidden some information that we find out in the ensuing back half of the season are actually implanted in our main character Flynn Fisher's head in her brain, which explains why she's got the convulsions, a little bit of the seizures, and the hand shaking. And so they delve into that a little bit. But when we start in the first half of the back end of the season, we have this assassin that's been hired named Bob, this Irish assassin that is being threatened and contracted to kill the Fishers in their current timeline of 2028. And so they do some build up. They show that he's got a daughter. He gets threatened. His daughter gets threatened. He goes to a bowling alley. So there's some backstory to some degree, kind of showing this character, and you think that basically there's going to be more to him, which is an underlying potential issue with the show, that they have all these characters that they spend time building up, and then you think it's going to go somewhere, and then they die, or you get a sense that maybe they're going to fall by the wayside.
Using 3 episodes, I think.
Yeah, they build him up, and he ends up initially trying to take Flynn and her brother out on a bridge, and their friend shows up, and they end up getting out of that. He gets arrested. We find out that the sheriff is corrupt, and so the sheriff actually releases him into Corbell Pickett's, the drug lord, custody to his house. And so there's some pretty cool scenes around Bob the assassin, the violence of Bob, and then we spent a little bit of time in a few of the episodes in the back end of the season, more time with Tommy, the deputy that obviously loves Flynn, and she has feelings for him. I don't know how much that's going to pay off. I feel like there's a little bit of miscasting with Tommy. I don't sense chemistry between him and Chloe Grace Moretz on screen. Maybe that'll change, but they don't have a lot of scenes together. But when they do, I'm not as invested in that. But Tommy obviously has stumbled on the corruption in the town, supporting Corbell, and so we see Tommy break out of that and take matters into his own hands. And then we get back to the year 2099, and we start to find out that there's some betrayal that goes on. There's 2 characters, Ossian and Ash, that work for Lev Zuboff, the Kleps, and Ash, this girl, she turns on Lev and goes to Charisse, the research initiative, and says, look, he's trying to take the information that's in Flynn's head. So he lets Dr. Charisse know that that's where the information is stored. And then so she basically betrays Lev. And when she does so, Charisse then says, I'm going to speed up the jackpot, which basically enters plagues and wars and famines and things to destroy the world, right? In essence, there's going to be a nuke that goes off in North Carolina where it's going to wipe out Flynn's family and everybody around. And so she's speeding up the jackpot, and Flynn gets wind of this and has to stop her. So do you think at this point, when we start to get into, I think of the back end, the last 2 episodes I thought were really good, but at episode 6, it tends to get a little bit more convoluted, right? What were your thoughts around episode 5 and 6 around Bob and finding out that the information was stored in Flynn's brain and some of the stuff around?
So I thought the scenes with Bob, he's like this Irish hitman. And those scenes were probably some of the most entertaining, even though they really weren't that relevant in the long run.
Right.
They hire him from the future, and he tries to kill Flynn and Burton, and fails ultimately. And you kind of see what a machine this guy is. He's just this trained killer. And those scenes were entertaining, but the problem that I have is I don't really understand how they're influencing the past from the future. How just like that they can end the world, and that to me it kills my suspension of disbelief. Like, oh well, we're gonna drop a nuke on a power or what was it, a missile silo or something like that.
Yeah, they're going to a silo to do some sort of terrorist event to speed up the jackpot, right?
And it's like how are you doing that? And they don't really explain how they're doing that. Like,
I guess from a writer standpoint, their answer would be when you talked about the stubs in a prior episode, is if they kill this timeline because of the way stubs are built, it doesn't necessarily impact the other branches, right? So it,
Right.
it wipes Fisher, her family out, the Fishers out, and everybody around there. It speeds up the jackpot, but it's convoluted, right? Because
It is.
we don't really see how those plans are put together.
Are you communicating with other people through VR headsets, or like how is it?
We haven't
How
seen
is it
any of that,
happening? We
right.
don't know how that's happening. To me, it's just
Instead of spending some of the time on some of the other characters that may not pay off at all,
right.
they could have spent some more time on building
Explaining
that up.
how they have the ability to manipulate the past. And to me, I'm just kind of rolling my eyes at that point.
Yeah, because I think episodes 5 and 6 were the weakest of the 8 episode season. There was some supposition, and they had characters that they were introducing us to for the first time, and Bob, and then by episode 7, Bob's gone.
But I mean, I like some of those scenes. Like I like the scene when he goes to the bowling alley.
Oh, the bowling alley was
That's
good.
an interesting scene. It's probably the least relevant. Really doesn't mean that much, but it's fun to watch, right? But I mean, the overreaching part of the show, the part that means the most, you know, how the future affects the past and what's going to happen in that certain timeline. They don't really explain it in a way that makes any sense to me. And
Well, Bob had 4 really good scenes like that obviously are not going to end up paying off in the
Right.
bigger story. But Bob, the first scene was on the bowling alley, then the bridge,
Mhm.
then the clinic where he kills Reese when he finds Flynn and Burton's mother,
All right.
and then they end up taking him out. So he's got the bridge, he's got the bowling alley, he's got the clinic, and he also is at Corbell's house and he kills Corbell's wife
Right.
in front of the fish tank. There's 4 really great action scenes with Bob. And that's great if you're introducing this character to us that's going to be in season 2 or have a bigger role.
He's
And
not.
maybe he will. Maybe some version of him will come back. But he ends up getting taken out at the clinic by Burton and the haptic Marines that we
Mhm.
find out later on. That's another thing we find out in the back half of the season is that when they go to what's called the inverse pyramid, Alita meets her girlfriend Grace in a past. We see a scene from the past where she brings her to the pyramid that we see at the beginning of the show. It's
Mhm.
called the God Font, and they say, "Look, this was done years ago, where they did 8,000 experiments, research on 8,000 different sources, and one of them was where they put implants in Marines." And we see a scene of these Marines that we find out later is Burton and Connor.
Right.
They're friends. How Connor got his legs blown off. I thought that was pretty cool. Because I like Connor and I like where they could potentially take Connor. But then we have the back end. We have Detective Ainsley that shows up at Lev's house, and we think initially Detective Ainsley is a villain, but we find out pretty quickly that Detective Ainsley does not want to cooperate with Charisse and questions Lev. So you've got these various levels of villainy. You've got Corbell in the present day. That runs the town, the drug lord, and his nephew Jasper, and then you have Lev Zuboff and the Kleps, and what their motivations are, because Lev will kill everybody, and then Charisse, who has her own motivations and trying to cover up the information that's got out and that's in Flynn's brain, and then you have Detective Ainsley, who you find out is actually going to work with Flynn to
Right.
try to help save her time, and then and her friends and family in the future. So all these things are at play, and let's deal with Corbell first. So Corbell gets taken out. We think he's dead, but he's not. Tommy finds out that the sheriff is corrupt, kills the sheriff, and then shoots Corbell with one of the futuristic stunt guns, basically, that would kill somebody,
Yeah,
but Corbell's alive. But in the meantime, Jasper takes over, his nephew, and Jasper ends up wiping out the other drug guys that are trying to take over
Yeah.
on the railroad tracks.
That was a good scene.
Yeah. So do you feel like that they're gonna go somewhere with Jasper? Are you invested in Jasper and Corbell's storyline?
I mean, I kind of like the way he runs the town and stuff. Like, I think he's a good character. I think I don't think they'll kill him off. He looks
He's
like
too good of
he
a
looks
villain.
like maybe he's in critical condition. He's probably going to come back and then that's his nephew, I think, right? Jasper.
That's his nephew.
And I think he's probably going to
And we know that Corbell has done other VR because there was a scene earlier in the season where he's in Havana or the Copacabana or something.
That's how they contacted him from the
Right.
future.
So you have a feeling that Corbell is going to be in play in season 2 and will leave this timeline and be part of what's going on in the future, right? There's no way they're not going to do that with Corbell.
Yeah.
Unless it's just bad writing, but so
But,
and then Jasper,
I don't know. They acted like they're going to maybe explore other timelines.
So Jasper takes over for Corbell. So, so that's it's a little interesting where they're going to take the Jasper and Corbell storyline, and it's got to tie into the larger story. So they've got their work cut out for them there. But and then you have Wilf and Alita. We find out that all these people in the future. Now we saw a future London where there's not a lot of people around. So when they get past the VR facade, buildings don't look brand new anymore. They're still being constructed and they're torn down, and you've got not very many people around, and so a lot of the people that you see are simulations. And so we find out that a lot of those people were killed because they had disease, they had viruses, and so there was an outbreak, and so a pandemic, and so we find out that they were taken out, and that's what Alita ends up in the last episode, I believe, reveals to Wilf, is that, look, this is where your family's buried, and I'm building a rebellion. We've got implants in us to have us not remember what happened to us, but I'm awake now. I remember everything that's happened, and you need to join us. So is that going to pit Wilf against Flynn in season 2? Because obviously Alita wants that information back that's in Flynn's head, and so you've got that potential confrontation happening. Then you have Lev, who is being told by his father's friends in the closing credits of the season to basically close these loops, kill everybody, to protect what's happened before. And then you have Dr. Charisse, who is trying to come after Flynn, and Flynn ends up finding out how to. She goes to an outpost, uses this little watch clock or stopwatch, and ends up creating a new stub. So she's basically jumping timelines. And in doing so, the biggest mystery of season 1 is Flynn doesn't want to be found, so she's trying to convince Charisse that she's dead in the year 2028. So she talks Connor, her friend, the Marine, a former Marine with her brother. She talks Connor into she's going to go out near the creek, and Connor's going to shoot her from a distance.
So Charisse won't destroy her timeline.
Right. So she'll save the timeline. There won't be a terrorist attack.
However they would do that.
But we don't see her get shot. We hear the shot, but we don't see. And then her eyes open up, and she's in the year 2032, which is what we saw when you see in the outpost. She picks that timeline, and you see her eyes open up, and Detective Ainsley's there, and she says, "Shall we begin?" But Flynn doesn't say anything. She just smiles, which makes me think that it's not really Flynn that's there. Her body's an avatar, right? And maybe it's Dr. Charisse who's found Ainsley.
I don't know about that, but who knows?
So in summary, there's a lot of stuff going on. I think season 2 has been greenlit, so we're at least going to see a season 2 of this show, if not a season 3. The back half of the season, we saw more of the Marines, Connor and Burton, who I think are really good for the show. We saw more action, which I liked. We didn't see enough of what I believe the future and some of the virtual reality aspects of the show that are kind of a little bit more like a Matrix type feel to it. So I think there was enough of that.
Less like that. As at the first few episodes, you were thinking. I said Ready Player One and Matrix vibes. It's not like that at all, really.
Yeah, I think they run the danger of being too convoluted.
Yeah.
Too many characters that don't pay off, that don't tie into each other.
And science that makes no sense at all. I mean,
and when you explore the time travel and the science of it, you're going to have people pick it apart and say that there's a ridiculousness to this. But I mean, I liked it I think it had some bold aspects to the show. I liked Chloe Grace Moretz. I liked her brother Burton. I liked Connor, the Marines. I liked Lev. I think those characters are really good. The other characters that Alita and Ash and Tommy, the deputy, there's some of these other characters that have gotten a lot of screen time, and I don't know how much they move the story forward. So there's got to be a focus in season 2 about the core of really what pushes the story forward, right?
Right.
And their focus around that. I don't know. When these shows come out, a first season, for those that don't know, you'll have a show or series launch, and there'll be writers and showrunners, and then season 2 they jump to another show. So who knows what we're going to see in season 2? Will the writing style change? Will they tie everything up in a way that makes sense for the story? I like the show. I would recommend it for people that really like the science fiction aspect of it. I would just caution that if you're watching it, there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief that you have to have. It's not as well crafted as some other shows and series that we've talked about. Things that really, when you do time travel, that do it well. And so it's a challenge for the show to get to the end point where I think they need to get and do it in a way that makes sense. But there are parts of this that I really like, and I think some of the casting is really done well. And I'm interested to see where it goes. Are you going to tune into season 2? You're going to be covering it with me, so you're going to have to watch it.
Yeah,
But are you looking
It'll-
forward
It'll
to
feel
season
like
2?
homework, unfortunately. is
Okay.
what-
So they've got their work cut out from you as a fan or potential viewer.
yeah, I'm not like in love with it. I would say on a 1 to 10 scale, it's probably a 5 or a 6.
Okay.
I don't-
Okay.
What would you give it?
A little bit higher than that. I mean, like I'd give it like
7?
a 7. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's got some work cut out for it, but I did like it.
Yeah.
I
didn't think it was awful. I just, whenever you watch stuff like this, a lot of the times, the further you go, it gets to the point where it makes no sense.
And for those people that are maybe doing other things while they're watching the show,
yeah,
the
don't do
back
that.
half of the
They love-
season, it got harder to do that.
Yeah.
Like in episode 5 and 6, going into episode 7, there's action moments, but you start to hear things and you go, okay, what just happened here? Like we talked about at the very end, it wasn't really easily understood that she went to the year 2032, which is 4 years after her original timeline.
Right.
You have to really look at the outpost to see that's where she went. But there's some things that are, if you're not paying attention or you're doing other things, it's like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And so, I'd give it a 7. And but for those that like this type of material, I think you'll enjoy it, or you'll at least enjoy parts of it. And we'll be here to cover season 2. And with that, if you like what you saw today and you like what you heard, leave us a comment below, hit the like button, and most importantly, subscribe so that we can grow our channel. And TCB.